Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the CTMP 60 podcast. We just wanted to say, first of all, a big thanks to all of our fans for the feedback from our first show with Norris McDonald. Listening to Norris's stories, it was really a no-brainer having him as the first episode in this podcast series as we trace 60 years of incredible racing history at this circuit. Some of those stories I hadn't heard before, and I was hoping that we were going to get that type of stuff, those stories about Fangio and him being at the Malton airport looking at the F1 cars as they came off the plane for the first time. If you haven't listened yet, please go back and do so. It was fantastic. My guest for the second episode of the show is my occasional co-host, my dad, CTMP co-owner himself, Mr. Ron Fellows, along with my mom, Linda, and Carlo Fidani, the ownership of the track now. And he's a member of the Canadian Motorsport Hall of Fame. He's a member of the Order of Canada, and he's still fast as ever in a race car. And I love hearing my dad tell all of his stories, going on road trips and, you know, the fireside chats, let's call them, throughout the years. I always ask him about stuff, so I knew where to find some of the little golden nuggets, and also heard some stuff that I hadn't really heard before as well. So if you love hearing my dad's stories as much as I do, please feel free to like, share, and subscribe. And without further ado, here we go for the second episode of the CTMP 60 podcast. All right, here we go, episode 2. I wanted to talk about, for those who didn't watch, maybe haven't watched episode 1 yet, but just talk about some of your, what did you think of what Norris had to say, and what were some of your favorite stories that he told? I think my favorite was the one that surprised me the most was the one about Fangio, because I had seen a video, maybe it was around probably the I think he said it was 66, right? Something like that. But
yeah, I don't remember that part, but carry on. Yep.
I'd seen a video, it was like a newsreel type thing, and it was either Players 200 or like the sports car, when it was the Canadian Grand Prix for sports cars.
Right.
And it was they had mentioned, and they showed a clip of Fangio standing there, but I always wondered, like, did he ever drive the track? And apparently he raced in that celebrity event.
A mini Cooper celebrity event.
Yeah. Shout out to Kelly Cook, who reached out to me to mention that that Fangio celebrity race. I'll send you these photos, but Kelly's dad was there, and so it was 62. Challenge
62. Wow.
Challenge of the Coopers, Mosport 1962. So Kelly's dad took these photos. I'll send them to you. But thank you, Kelly, for sending them to us. And it's photos of Fangio driving the Mini Coopers in Innis, Ireland, and Pedro Rodriguez was in that race too.
Oh wow!
So
how would they have gotten those guys into Mini Coopers?
I don't know, but that was my favorite story, I think.
That is so cool. I've never heard any real stories from 61 and talking about being at the first Players 200 in 61 as a teenager. That to me is really cool, because up until for me, up until 1969, I didn't even know there was a track.
Right.
We didn't move to the Toronto area until I was, 11 or I guess 11 at the time. Until summer of 69. Anyway.
Brian Adams. Big Brian Adams guy over here.
Yeah.
Reckless album. It's a great album, by the way.
Yes. Anyway, I think they too. You hear stories of some of the Can-Am races and the USAC stock car race. I think he was talking about at one point. Yeah, it's all pre my first experiences at what was then Mosport Park.
one of the things as well that I thought about a lot was, and I listened to the podcast several times, having to edit it and some of that stuff, but um, the difference between the way they viewed drivers back then and the way it's viewed now, it's almost like, you see, especially NASCAR and Formula One and IndyCar, the big, televised ones, and it's almost like race car drivers are like um, movie stars because you can see them so much. Like movie stars, so what they like in the '60s or whatever. You see movie stars like Jimmy Stewart and those guys. You'd see them in all the movies, and so you could see them all the time. But the thing that struck me was that you only heard about these like race car drivers, these like gladiators. You heard about them and you read about them. You never would really see them, maybe in a newsreel once in a while. And so when they like descended on Mosport back where Mosport then Mosport, it was like Norris said, these guys were like gods. And I thought that was so interesting because if you think about it, if we didn't have social media, we didn't have TV, and we only heard about, Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton, if we only heard about people like that, and then they came to race, in Montreal, like today as a comparison, it'd be like, who are these people? These are like gods, and they're coming to our track, So I thought that was really, really interesting.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting point that the not so much certainly nowhere near the level of visibility that well, not only for racing drivers but also for the sport, with all the with multiple specialty channels, and there's just so much more coverage, and I don't think that hurts the star status. But yeah, there's something to be said for, you know, you'd read about. I think one point Norris mentioned that as well. Your connection with past Formula One races, for example, would be, your next month's racing magazine. And I think depending on the driver's personality, you'll find more of them in utilizing social media, and those that are a little bit more private, I guess, is probably a good term.
Sure. Like, I don't think Sebastian Vettel has Instagram. Like, some guys just choose not to have it, but obviously the teams and stuff post on their behalf and everything. But
sure.
And it's kind of like a double-edged sword, right? Because if you have Instagram, you're almost like opening like a little portal into your life and seeing, and like it's cool to see, Lewis Hamilton, like what he gets up to and off the track and stuff. But also, you're taking away like that veil of like mysteriousness that almost makes you kind of, like a gladiator type, this person who just like shows up the day of the race on TV and you're like, oh my God, there he or she is type thing. So
right. Yeah, I think the cool part for race fans is to get behind the scenes footage, stories that you wouldn't otherwise get, as opposed to a post qualifying interview, post race interview. And I think that's what Netflix has done for the Netflix series has done for Formula One is put even more personality into it. And when I think about the relationships that you have with sponsors in the past, that's where the value is in it becoming more personal, and the sort of the better that you can see that personality being more of just a regular person and dealing with issues and the the pressures of the job, I think the more interesting it is,
and the stories,
it makes it more realistic. And the stories, 100%.
And the stories throughout the field, though, is what I thought was interesting about, especially the first season of Netflix. And I think that was somewhat accidental, because I don't think the major teams had signed on for the first season, so they were almost forced to look more at like the kind of the mid pack battles and the back of the pack type battles, and yeah, it was perfect. Like when that first came out, I had people coming up to me at the gym that knew I did some racing, and they were like wanted to know about Formula One, and I'm like, what? I didn't even know you knew what Formula One was. Like, and then all of a sudden these people are asking, and they're saying they're gonna watch this weekend, and you know, they're interested in like the mid pack battles, and yeah, so.
Again, because they've got some insight into
they've got some context.
Context, personality, understanding the personalities within the team, etc. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, and that's all stuff that we've known for a long time, and so even when it's and I think there's been some fantastic racing even while Mercedes has dominated. There's been lots of great racing, and but even when a few times a year you can expect Lewis Hamilton to just like run away with it, but you can still enjoy the race for the most part by knowing what the consequences or variables are of who finishes where in the mid pack and what those battles are like. And so they kind of open that up to the fan who hasn't been watching for that long to really understand that, and that was really cool. But yeah, that was kind of something I thought was so interesting with Norris, is like, because now if you see one of those people, like if you go and you meet Lewis Hamilton in real life or something, he is like a movie star, because you see him everywhere. You see him on TV, you see him on social media, you see him on Netflix. And back then, if you just read about Jimmy Clark, this guy who was dominating, and then he shows up at your track with like the famed Lotus team, and it would be like like the gods descending.
Colin Chapman,
descending from the heavens on Bowmanville.
True enough.
I realized
staying at the old Flying Dutchman Inn in Bowmanville.
I realized I was watching it back, and I realized I really didn't say much in that first podcast, but I was so captivated listening to you and Norris, and I know you guys go obviously way back and have a better rapport, so I was happy to just let you guys talk. And so I was just kind of like a fly on the wall. It was like a personal podcast for me before it went live. No, it was good, and we've got some, hopefully, lining up some more stuff that will be interesting. So
absolutely,
more people and especially for you, because I know you have such an experience, and people have such respect for you, especially that it's easy for them to just like riff with you about racing, and that's a good thing. But
hopefully, we hope get some additional cool guests to be able to shoot the breeze about the history. What we want to do is get some guests that have some cool stories and have been a big part of the history of the sport, not only in this country, but through Canadian Tire Motorsport Park and what was then Mosport Park.
Yeah. Well, speaking of, I know, so when you've told me so many stories over the years, and not all of them have to do with Mosport CTMP, obviously, because you've driven at so many different places, but there are a lot of stories from specifically big moments for you that happen at Mosport. It's obviously your home track, and it's a place that you had some of your big first wins, but also I'm sure people know or are familiar with your story of how you fell in love with racing, and that was at Mosport in 1969. But for you, I can't imagine being there in 1969 and seeing that for the first time, that must have been just something incredible. So,
well, it was mind blowing. I was attracted to the sport, seen a little bit on television, and my uncle, Chuck McLaren, and his friend John Cross rallied, and so they had cool cars, and I think we'd been on a concession, go-kart track a few times, but to that point, to the mystique around, leaving very early on race day morning. It was dark because it was third weekend of September. Dark when we left. We get to the track and it's dark because my brother Rob and I and Chuck and John had to get there early because it wasn't reserved seating, and they wanted a spot at the top of the grandstand. So we got there early, and in the front straight grandstand, which is now where the event center is, getting there early, getting a spot at the top, and then as the day goes by, you've got out come the Formula One cars for the morning warm up, and it was unbelievable that the sight of the cars, the sound of them, obviously the speed, and the smells. I mean, it was awesome. I was just awestruck.
Did you get a chance to get close to any of the drivers? I know it was a lot easier back then, but
no, not really. Not that time. In future years, yeah, you were able to walk down the sort of the backside of the garage, and you'd occasionally catch a glimpse of one of the drivers. I think the first time I sort of got some sort of relative access to the garage area was a Can-Am race. But yeah, we spent the day up in the grandstands basically, and there were a couple of support races, and then the Grand Prix. Yeah, so it was just really cool. I'm pretty sure
you got close to Gilles one time, right? Didn't you tell me that, or am I imagining that? Or was that at Montreal?
Yeah, it was actually Montreal with my photo credential.
Oh yeah.
So I had.
There's a lot of that going around. I've heard that before.
Yeah. I was with. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, I was with again with Uncle Chuck, and I was carrying a camera.
Yeah.
And I managed to click off some photos. I'm sure I've got them somewhere. And I remember getting some. He was sitting in the car with the bodywork off, and I was standing there and clicked a few pictures off, and he didn't have a helmet on, and he looked at me, gave the little wink, and it was just, holy cow, this is so cool.
Yeah.
Anyway, it was
wow.
For me it was all about the fascination with the speed, the sound, and then as you got more into it, it was obviously the interest in the competition, which was always the most enjoyable. Playing the high speed chess game, and it was just a matter of, as you mentioned, okay, I'm 11 years old and I'm sitting in the grandstands watching. How do I get on the other side of the fence?
Yeah. Obviously, you were there in '69, and then you kept coming back to the races at what was then Mosport, Can-Am, and F1, and other races. But then
sports car, Trans Am, yep.
And then I think one of the moments that you've told me about is in '72 or '73, but watching Ronnie Peterson in the rain, and so you started to put these things together, like not just watching as a fan, but starting to watch as a driver, as a student of the sport, and picking up on what the drivers were doing. And I know for you think that was like a pivotal moment pivotal moment in understanding some technique, right?
Yeah. I don't know what year it was. I think it was maybe 70, 74, 75.
There was no race in 75 though.
No, it's right. 75 was the off years. So either 74 or 76, whenever Ronnie Peterson was in the six-wheel Tyrrell.
Okay, yeah.
And it was the Saturday or practice day, and pouring rain, and there's just a few cars went out except Peterson, and he was out there for I don't know how long he was out there. He was out there enough to where I got to go to several corners and see what he was doing, because it was we were at the top of turn 2 and seeing this this outside line that he was taking, and there were a few cars on the track, and he's just blowing by, a couple of cars around the outside of well, this is interesting. So it's the rain line. Back then the track was 28 feet wide, and hanging it out around the outside of turn 2. I mean, the outside rear tire was almost in the dirt every time, sliding over the top of 2 around the outside. It was spectacular to watch.
Yeah, and it makes me think about how CTMP is such a interesting place, like for people who have only been to maybe street races or other circuits, but you can literally walk around and see like all the corners.
Yeah.
And so you had that opportunity to do that with Peterson in the wet, and so literally you're walking from corner to corner,
running,
running from corner to corner, being able to see exactly what he's doing.
Yeah,
that's pretty incredible.
Yeah, I think I started racing karts in 74, 75, in around there. Had a paper route for about a year to save up enough money. But yeah, no, we were going to finding our way to the track, either my dad or a friend's dad. They'd drop us for the day and come back and get us. So that was kind of
that's cool.
Kind of work as soon as you got to the, and that's the beauty of where we're at now with the facility, where when you got over 12 years old, you had to buy a ticket, and but if you didn't have a lot of money, for my dad at the time, or my parents, he would drive us there, drop off my brother and I, and he'd come back and get us. So when we actually pay, and then we were able to drive and get there, it was different story. But certainly the goal was race karts, as always. Finding the money to race was key, but certainly in karting it was means to an end, and getting an opportunity to learn the ropes, and then my uncle started. He was rallying professionally, Uncle Chuck, and he bought a B sedan 510 to go have some fun with. So that's what I got my racing license in.
One thing, I guess, before we started talking about your own driving, but it's just like, if you tell me a bit about the 70s as a spectator at then Mosport, because I'll tell you, like, my own experience when we did the 2017 kind of Formula One revival.
50
and
years.
Those were
the
50 years since the first Grand Prix, and that was like, I was at Moss Corner, I think, and it was seeing those cars come through there for the first time, and primarily 70s F1 cars, and like the sound and the look, and I was like, I felt like I was having, what do they call that, golden age thinking. I was like, man, I wish I was maybe born a little earlier so I could have been there for real. But what was that like?
Well, it was not a whole lot different than my first experience. It was just magic to get out there. And Moss Corner Turn 5 became our favorite spot. There was a few of some of my high school buddies that were involved in cars, driving cool fast cars. We would gather and go to then Mosport, and again get there early. And we wanted to be right at the front of the fence and get a spot there for all the big races. So that became for us. That became our spot, was to be right in the middle between 5A, 5B. You could see them coming down through 4 and see them go around through 5A, B, C, and then up the hill and disappear at just past the first plateau. So it was just a really cool spot to watch, and that was kind of the place. And yeah, certainly the anticipation of any start, whether it was Can-Am, Formula 5000, Trans Am, Formula One, to be down at turn 5 and you can hear them coming.
Yeah. And
you're just waiting for them to come busting under the bridge and down the hill in 4. I think it was 76 Formula One race. James Hunt and Ronnie Peterson came down turn 4, lap 1, side by side through 5A, and I forget who did what. It may have been, I think it was Peterson. Hunt beat him into 5A, but kind of shoved wide a little bit, and Ronnie Peterson dove down the inside between 5A and 5B to take the lead back.
Yeah,
and this was on the first lap of a 200-mile Grand Prix, and the track was 28 feet wide. So we were losing our minds watching that. But it was a race that Hunt ended up winning, and which continued his quest to win the world championship that year.
Yeah,
and it was I think Lauda's second Formula One race back from his terrible crash at the Nürburgring, where he was burned and near dead, and came back for, I guess the first one would have been Monza, and 3 weeks later was Canadian Grand Prix in '76.
Insane, just crazy stories. But who were the drivers? So aside from Peterson, obviously I'm sure Gilles, but James Hunt. Who were the drivers that you really noticed?
When I think about Formula 5000, there was Brian Redman was dominant. Epi Weitz is a Canadian. He was running in Formula 5000 then. Danny Angayas, who was super aggressive. He was super quick. And then
I've heard that from Miles too. Miles said that Danny Angayas was visually, you could tell he was super fast and aggressive. What was it about his driving style? Just
he
sliding
was
around and stuff.
Yeah, he was fearless and great car control. It didn't matter what he was driving.
Yeah,
Danny on the gas. And gosh, who else? Certainly, watching into the early '80s, watching Epi in the Corvette Trans Am car. The car, it was Brad Francis was doing the prep on that, and it was just an awesome sounding Trans Am car, and Epi ended up winning the championship there. I think 81 or 82.
Mm-hmm.
But
I remember you telling me about Epi too. Is he was very calculated, right?
Yeah, super smooth, and he was he was a guy that rarely put a foot wrong. He, if all he had was a 5th place car, he was going to make sure he didn't get anything worse than that. Yeah. And some of us are guilty of trying to get more than we probably should sometimes. That was advice I got from Jack Roush at one point. It was, Ron, stop trying to drive every race like it's your last one.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry. Just trying to win
Jack.
every single one. Yeah.
Yeah.
And oh gosh, who else? Watching Ludwig, watching Heimrath in his Porsches. I think they were the 935s were spectacular to watch, super powerful. Can-Am cars on Mark Donohue was super quick. I think probably the most spectacular driver in a Can-Am car that I saw was Jody Scheckter in a Porsche 917-10 Can-Am car. I think it was one of the L&M sponsored cars.
Yeah.
The thing had like 1,000 horsepower, and
he's using all of
it. oh yeah. Turn one at CTMP was a mostly left turn for Jody Scheckter.
Oh my God.
Oh yeah, it was just spectacular. The bias ply racing tires back then sort of lent themselves to a little bit more of that style. You could get away with it just because of the way the difference in how the tires manufacture the bias ply. Being able to drive it a little more sideways was acceptable. It didn't help. It certainly didn't help tire longevity, but to get a quick lap, you were hanging it out. And certainly I think about even the Formula Atlantic days with Gilles and KK, the battles they had. Ray Hall was in it then, Danny Sullivan, Kevin Cogan, I recall, Howdy Holmes. Bill Brack, for Canadians, it was Bill Brack, Craig Hill, our drivers I remember.
Tom Gloy in that series?
Yeah, Tom Gloy was in Atlantic back then. Yep.
Who you later went to race for?
I did indeed. Yes.
What was the in your opinion, because when you look back at the history of that era and the Atlantic history, and it was really, like you said, KK Rosberg, Bobby Rahal, and then we think about that kind of famous Trois Rivières race. What was it, 76, I guess, where they had James Hunt and some other Formula One drivers competing. Yep. Why was it, Formula Atlantic Canada was just like the place to race in that formula, and why was that?
Because of the quality of the series. You had first it had money in it. With player support, and then with Labatt, and I believe, that, and it had a TV package, and I don't know if it had any reach beyond Canada, but there was interest, and they were on some of the support races for major events as well as standalones. They were a draw, and again, I think it just the when you have a prize pool that is significant, it's going to attract teams from all over, and that's what it did. Fred Opert Racing was who KK drove for, and you had Gilles driving for the team was based in Toronto, I believe, at the time, but it had. With drivers coming from the States and other Europeans, it was as soon as they see the quality of the competition, that attracts more competition, and certainly with Gilles getting his break to go drive for McLaren at the British Grand Prix for the first time, based on waxing James Hunt at Trois-Rivières and Patrick Depailler, and I think Alan Jones may have been there then in Atlantic cars. That I think it's and how quick he was. People look at, okay, well, where did he come from? And that creates attraction as well for competitors. So
what an incredible opportunity, and there's a lot to say about that, because something that, first of all, wouldn't happen today. There's no way that Formula One drivers during the season would come and race an event like that and put themselves, and I think we've talked about this before, but putting yourself at risk, not only with the risks that were involved in that era, but and your reputation almost at some sort of a risk, because you are racing against these people who are up and comers, and somebody who could potentially almost steal your seat or that type of thing. But instead, James Hunt recommends him to the McLaren. That to me always just what a classy act, and what a crazy what a crazy turn of events.
Well, and thinking about a current Formula One driver driving in an Atlantic race, or in today's world, a current IndyCar driver going and running in Indy Lights because there's money there, or going and running an F2 race because there's money there. I mean, that's what that's what they used to do, and it was about the money. That's why Formula One drivers came over to run Indy, to run Can-Am. It was and certainly the that event at Trois-Rivières was a huge deal, and they had the sponsorship. They had the sponsorship to bring in these drivers, and they were prepared to do it.
And even before that, they run not only F2, but also you look at the history of the Tasman series, and they'd go
basically a winter Formula Atlantic series,
kind of these little phenomenons Formula Atlantic at Trois-Rivières and Tasman, and where it's almost like these little nuggets of gold, where these drivers went and competed, almost on lower levels, but the competition and the obviously the prize money and everything was worth it. And what a story!
They were cool. They were really cool cars. They sounded great. They they were a smaller version of a Formula One car, and they looked the part, sounded the part, and they put on a great show. And it was obviously a highly valuable career development step as well, in terms of your developing your craft as a driver.
Yeah. So Epi had driven in the first Canadian Grand Prix. We've all heard that story, and Norris obviously retold it on the last episode, and Al Pease had made a start. I think George Eden had made a start. But Gilles Villeneuve was the first full-time guy to get a ride, and with Ferrari nonetheless. And so he shows up in 77 at Mosport, the last Canadian Grand Prix at Mosport, with
in the third Ferrari.
I believe it was a 21. Was the 21 car
number 21? Yep.
But what was that like as a fan to show up and we got a Canadian on the grid racing for Ferrari?
It was huge. It was huge. It was a huge draw, not only for then Mosport, but it was also a huge draw for the week following at Watkins Glen. And in 77, the group of guys that I hung out with, that we went to races, we all pooled our funds and rented a motorhome to go down to Watkins Glen and follow Gilles, watch him at the U.S. Grand Prix. So I'm sure it was I don't remember, other than we were all excited, obviously, that Canadian guys got an opportunity with Ferrari, and there was a little bit of controversy at the time when he was Ferrari running a third car, and it caused Nicky to quit, and but it was given his skill level, it was Enzo Ferrari knew what he was doing.
Right. Yeah. And Nicky was kind of sore about that kind of thing, because didn't they replace him right away when he got injured? They brought in another driver, so there was obviously more to it. It wasn't. I'm sure it wasn't anything personal with Gilles. So.
No, not at all. He's just he's looking at it as an opportunity, and knowing that, and you think about it now, it was an unusual thing to do then, and think about it now, how it would be impossible for, I'm not even sure that they're allowed to even do it, to run a third car and just decide in the last few races we're gonna stick George Russell in a third Mercedes.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen. And it was I think, I don't know what the motivation was for Ferrari to do that, having signed him, but you just didn't see. You certainly don't see that now, and it was few and far between even then. Although Gilles was in a third McLaren, it was doable. But man, it just highly unusual set of circumstances that he's able to finish the last few races of the season in 77.
Yeah. And I'd love to have Alan Delaplante come on, who was Gilles' personal friend, and the way Alan told it to me, Gilles was basically, somebody had mentioned, you better have take somebody with you to document this type of stuff, and he had mentioned it to Alan, and so Alan kind of came with him almost as his personal photographer. I think that's the way, but we'll have to have Alan on to discuss it, but.
Good idea.
Yeah, for sure. And one of the things I read about Gilles' meeting with Enzo Ferrari was that I think Enzo was struck with him. He reminded him of one of the pre-war or pre-Formula One era Ferrari or Italian drivers. I can't remember the guy's name, but
might have been Nuvolari.
Yeah,
Tazio Nuvolari.
Yeah. I think
similar
his
stature
and his stature just like reminded him of him, and so he obviously had this like kind of strange connection with this person, and decided that he was gonna stick his neck out and run a third car for him. It's pretty crazy, insane story. But tell me about the when you started to drive, and like your first, what was the first time you ever drove on the CTMP Grand Prix circuit?
Yeah, it was in Uncle Chuck's Datsun 510 in I think I was probably in a novice race, working towards getting my national license and being able to move up to race against the
didn't you tell me you drove it in a go-kart or something?
I did. Yeah, didn't last very long.
So that was before
it blew up.
That was the first time you were ever on the track, was in a go-kart.
I guess it was. Yeah, you got a better memory than I do. Yeah. I just remember being really bumpy, and we had the wrong gear. And I don't know. I don't think I did very many laps, and the engine blew up. The two-stroke engine that seized itself. That was the end of that. Yeah. But anyway, hilarious. It was. Yeah, the first car race was Uncle Chuck's Datsun 510, and it was good fun. The kid Rolf von Engelbrechten about racing against his dad. His dad was in B that category, B sedan. He had a BMW 2002 that was, and he could drive. Werner Engelbrecht, his nickname was Slim, tall, skinny guy, and he was really, really good too. And I managed to beat him once, and it was at Shannonville in the rain with the that's 510.
Wow.
But it was, he was in back then in B sedan. Ralph's dad was the guy to beat, and he, and even before that it was Paul Lampke in B sedan 510. And I, digressing here, but I think about the Formula 1600 days when, Brian Stewart, Gary Magwood, John Scratch, Alec Purdy, Dave White, Clive Raymond, and a lot of the guys we had out for the Bulova celebration, and Peter Clare and his Mini and his partner, co-driver, they shared, Mike Cleary. Those were super competitive days back in what was then the Bulova series, which was a genius move by Harvey Hudis, the owner back then. The creating additional support races. Now when you when a series comes to town, it generally comes with a number of support races, but back then it didn't. So here was Harvey building his own series for to add to the show on a race weekend. So he created the Bulova series. First it was I think it was first sponsored by Shoppers World, and then Bulova, and I think Max Milk was involved at some point, but it was a series for Formula 1600, and then B and C sedans, and it was super competitive racing, and particularly Formula 4. Danny Britt was another guy who was bad fast. Luc de Satelier. Anyway, there's a long list.
You always joke when we work together on the Ron Fellows driving experience nights, or whenever, or just kind of in general, whenever Formula Ford comes up or whatever, you always joke that, I went broke racing Formula Ford. So I don't, to be honest,
it's true.
I don't know too much about your Formula Ford days, so we don't really talk. Maybe that's a sore subject for you, but
it did. The success was. It was a bit of a roller coaster.
Yeah, it's extremely.
It was frustrating. Sure. No, it was super competitive. When I get into it, there was
I've also
Crosley's,
seen your helmet and your visor have you in a Formula Ford, and your helmet visor just says Ronnie across the top of it, which is hilarious.
Really?
Yeah.
I don't remember that.
Ronnie.
Anyway,
Fellows. Is that what was that your gunslinger name?
I guess. Yeah. Yes. The hair about this long, but I had a stash, I'm sure.
Yeah. We both have the COVID haircut right now.
Yes, we do. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. At some point. Yeah.
Tell me about Formula Ford, though. Sorry.
Yeah. No. The Gary Magwood was another top guy in Formula Ford. But they put on great shows. When they were the support races at the big weekends like Formula One, Can-Am, etc., they get massive grids of these cars. They come from the States again because Harvey created something that was unique to then Mosport, and it was a series based at that track only, and it got to and it had great pricing, and that's where, again, it attracted, Americans to come up and race, particularly when it's on a big showcase weekend, like a Can-Am, Trans Am, Formula One race, IMSA weekend. So, that was, yeah. So it was, for me, wanting, that was the step for me, was to get into a Formula 1600. And, I bought an older Lotus 59, and then got hooked up with a guy. Yeah, it was tough. I had a couple of my buddies helping me, and we didn't know what we didn't know. We didn't have anywhere near enough money, and it was frustrating. And that was 78 and 79, with Wayne Pinney, who had run championship teams in the Bulova days. He was, I learned a lot from him, about the discipline involved, teamwork, that year in 79, and also about, he was investing in myself and Randy Packham at the time. And so you had to, there were these conversations about performance. And that was where you had to, it was the first time that not only did you want to perform, but there was expectations by the guy who was basically on the team. And it was a lot of fun. But we eventually ran out of money, and I ended up, not racing for about 5 years, just because I ended up with a bunch of debt. And my timing wasn't very good with that in that era. I ended up buying a new car at 81, and then there were guys like Ian Willis was racing back then. I think Ian. Gord Cullen was a hot shot. Ludwig Heimer Jr. It was got to beat, and then along came Davy Jones, who was a 16-year-old kid, and the year that I went out on a limb to buy a new car. It was good for 1 year. They introduced Formula 2000 the next year, so Formula 1600 became basically a club race series, and Formula 2000 became the series for at the showcase events. So that was that, and I didn't have the money, and I just ended up working at the gas company for trying to pay off all the mountain of debt for the next 5 years.
And it was Harvey Hughes, right, who kind of talked you out of this a bit of a maybe an unrealistic dream of the open wheel stuff because of your size and your.
Well, that was a factor. Being 6'2", the cars didn't fit very well back then, and didn't even when I ran an Atlantic car for a few races in 1990.
Yeah.
There's some pretty scary photos if that thing had ever gone on its roof, with shoulders sticking out. There's an extension on top of the extended roll bar, which is not going to do any good if I actually roll over. But anyway, Harvey was really helpful. This was back when I was just getting, in the mid 80s, along came, Players GM Series, Rothmans Porsche, Export A Formula 2000, or Canadian Tire Formula 2000 initially. And there was prize money, and there was TV. So that was sort of the big break, to be able to buy. Certainly for me, the Camaro was affordable, and it was like 18 grand, and drive it to the track and race it, and win $6,000. And this is 1986. So that was a great value proposition for a guy like me who did not, I was still in debt, but you could see there was light at the end of the tunnel there, where if you did well, you felt like you had a shot because you're in equal cars.
Mm-hmm.
And and being able to get an opportunity to get hooked up with a Chevy dealer as a sponsor, and carry on. Certainly the success that I had in the Players GM Series. And getting an opportunity to do a one-off Trans Am race in '87. That was really Harvey in that window there. Harvey telling me, forget about open wheel, race Trans Am, IMSA at the time. Go race sports cars. There's manufacturers are there, spending money looking for drivers. If you're any good, they'll find you. And that was the advice, and it was excellent advice. So, and again, it was maybe in the mid to late '80s at some small window there when I was in the GM series, where that was I'd met Harvey a couple times, and
right.
that was solid advice.
Right. And so you were working at the Richard, was it called Spinard David Racing School? Is that what it was?
Yeah. So I had worked straight out of high school. Went to work for a natural gas company that was based in Brampton, and worked in construction. First as a laborer, and eventually it was like, okay, what pays the most money here? Machine operator and a welder. I'd rather run a machine. So anyway, I got to the point where I was making pretty good money for a young man as a machine operator, and I did that for 9.5 years. But at the auto show, and I'm thinking it was 1985. Yeah, 1985. Richard, I met Richard. He was starting his Formula 2000 racing school at Shannonville, and that was sort of like that was the window to get a shot at getting back into the business, and we'll have to get Richard on, and he probably knows the story better than I do. But I was at his school as a student, where it was super popular Formula 2000 school. What attracted me to it was the brand new Reynard F2000 cars in '85, and the school was running on. They were using slicks, and it was. And he had a school-based series, so it was basically a pay-as-you-play. Not dissimilar to the, arrive and drive today in karting, where you showed up and did a draw for your car, and there was he had scholarship programs to help with the if you were talented, and you might win half a dozen races. So it was a great opportunity, and kind of hit it off with Richard, and he ended up hiring me, and worked for him until through '87. I think so. I think I quit my day job after 9.5 years in the fall of '85, I think. And then
wow.
Yeah, and then there's a number of coincidences, getting to work at his school. And then there's this big announcement about this showroom stock Camaro Firebird series with these unheard of levels of prize money. And Richard wanted in, he was a guy that wanted in too. So, but that will be a story we can convince Richard to come and talk to us.
You Richard and 70 other guys, right?
Yeah. I came across, that's funny you bring that up because I came across in the basement a qualifying sheet from that first race in 86.
Yeah.
And it was either, there were like 75 cars and they had qualifying broken into groups.
Yeah.
And I remember being fifth and being disappointed. And Richard was, Ronnie, look where you are. Look down here.
Yeah.
You could be down there at the bottom of the grid. Perspective, yes.
I was talking
anyway.
to Rolf the other day, and he said, because it's the whole thing is this, Players GM, Rothman's Turbo Cup, Export A 2000, like the prize money and like the level of competition and the professionalism of the series, the TV, it set such a high standard, and people are still talking about it to this day. I was working with Rolf,
which is too bad.
Yeah, and I was working with Rolf recently on a project, and he was telling a story about that series, and the people that were there listening to the story, who were social distance, of course, but they can't believe that it was $6,000 to win.
Yeah,
and like it's
you were the car that cost 18 grand, and you drove it to the track. But they were incredible value propositions for the drivers, the dealers, where there was or even an open wheel talent. Because of the prize money, the being at big showcase events, and also TV. Mm-hmm. We had all three of those series getting national TV, and it was a big deal. So now it becomes a solid proposition for if you're any good, mm-hmm. you have a great opportunity to find yourself a sponsor.
Yeah.
Because of the value proposition, and that's one of the things we have to get back to is creating a better link, and that value proposition for kids going from karts to cars, or starting out in cars, moving from club racing to some sort of a national series.
Right.
There's got to be we can't be constantly talking about the days when it was, tobacco and beer sponsored. There's got to be an alternative. There has to be an alternative to enhance the development path, but another day.
Going back to CTMP and then Mosport back in the 80s, of course, and 90s. One of my favorite stories that you tell is, I think it's 87, but it's basically getting an impromptu offer to shake down a Trans Am Buick Somerset, and that kind of launching an opportunity for you. So please regale me with tell the story again, because I love the story.
Yeah, I was. It was 87. And I was still working at the school.
Okay.
We were sponsored, the player GM team then was sponsored by Motormaster, and Richard was the number one driver.
Ronnie was number two.
Ronnie was number two. Yeah. But anyway, Ray David was Richard's partner with the school. And Raymond drove as well. But we had we were at it was a Thursday. Yeah, it was a Thursday practice day for the Trans Am weekend in late September. And I'm under the tent, and this big burly guy comes up wearing a Bell Helmets jacket. And hey, is Richard around? Because at that point, Richard was Richard had done in his past Can-Am, Trans Am. Was viewed as in Formula Atlantic was, a super fast driver. And anyway, Gordy Oftedal came looking for Richard, and talked to Raymond, and Raymond said, "Well, Richard's not here, and what do you need?" "Well, I was looking for him to do a shakedown with one of my cars." And Ray I was standing here with my suit. I was wearing my suit, and Ray says, "Hey, let him do it." "Yeah, Ron, he's pretty good." and then I sort of wander over and, "Hi," and Gordy kind of looks me up and down and looks at the name on my suit, and he goes, "Ron Fellows, huh? Yeah, I heard of you. Okay, come drive my car." And yeah, he had two Buick Somersets in that Trans Am series, and neither of his gentleman drivers had shown up for the practice day, so he wanted me to shake them down, and man, it was spectacular to get out and with they probably had 600 horsepower back then, big slicks, and he's telling me, "Well, don't be going out and wrecking the thing. You just need to just shake it down."
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
That was my reminder. The first couple laps in that thing was a reminder that how much power they had. And oh, by the way, as opposed to being on a street tire, which is what we had for the Players GM cars, race tires required a little more heat to make grip. Because I think my second or third lap, I spun between 5A and 5B, but did a perfect
pirouette,
360, and to where the lap time he didn't really notice.
Right.
But it was just getting on the gas between 5A and 5B, right around. But no, it was just again one of those moments where, man, these cars are so cool, and I went quick. So Gordy was all over trying to get me in the car for that weekend.
Do you remember what the lap times were back then?
It was, yeah. I mean, I guess to say back then was probably 24s, 25s, 23s, something like that back then. Yeah.
I mean, you're like hustling. You're hustling the Players GM car to do like a minute 49, aren't you?
Minute 40, minute 41.
Minute 40. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe 42s. Yeah. But
okay.
Yeah. So essentially, these cars were a whole bunch quicker in every way, but it's a track, well, you're like, what have I got to lose?
Right.
So I ended up taking both of his cars out, and we ended up making a deal to do the next race after that, which was at Road Atlanta, and that worked out rather well. But I ended up, he needed some money, and to make it happen, but he was willing to work with me, and Gordy, this is all I've got. What I had was $5,000, which was essentially at the end of the season. You had back then for the Players GM series, you had to put a $5,000 bond. And if you were cheating or whatever, that's one of the ways they policed cheating, was with this $5,000 bond, which was tough to get that money together. But in the end, so that was what I had in terms of sponsorship to or cash to pay for the ride, which didn't even cover wouldn't have even covered tires. We were there, it was a practice day, a three-day weekend at Road Atlanta. But anyway, it ended up working out really well, and that was sort of created a path for my future based on showing up, driving for Gordy and finishing fourth in my first Trans Am race.
So was that your first time ever at Road Atlanta?
Yeah.
So did you feel at all like, because I've heard you talk about this before and say, oh, people were saying, oh, Road Atlanta is so intimidating and blah, blah, blah. But, having driven and honed your skills on at Mosport, it probably wasn't, quite as daunting as maybe somebody else coming from a different,
100%.
background.
Yeah.
You felt that?
Yeah. No, I was comfortable right away. Certainly, back then there was no chicane at the bottom of the hill. Turn 10 back then was trying to do it flat at the bottom of the hill, about a left, and then you climb the hill and went sailing under the bridge in turn 11 at going at a pretty rate of speed, and then down through turn 12.
Wow.
Cornering speed even under the bridge was much higher, because you went flat out down that hill and then tried to carry full throttle briefly on the uphill side. It was, but anyway, it was, as I've said before, learning to race at CTMP, for not only for me, but for countless drivers, the value of high speed cornering, elevation change, not a lot of room for error. It makes the transition elsewhere just that much easier.
Right.
We I can't remember where I qualified, 7th or 8th, I think, in that Trans Am race. And the field was made up of it was one class, but it was the turbo era was at its peak. So you had Roush and his Mercury Mercurs. They were turbocharged 4 cylinders. You had Nissan, Bob Sharp Racing had 2 cars. Paul Newman was in one. They had big, powerful turbos. Porsche had a turbo back then. And then the rest were the normally aspirated gang. And we ended up 4th, but first normally aspirated at Road Atlanta, which led to, importantly, getting a couple sets of free tires from Goodyear as a result of our finish, and which helped, and led to a first opportunity tryout with at least I got a test with Roush Racing the next year. So that was, and it was, again, you think about the chance meeting with Gordy Oftedal at then Mosport, getting opportunity to race for Gordy a few weeks later, and then that sort of springboarding to wanting to be full-time, seeing that there's opportunities in the Trans Am series. You had Ford, Chevy, Porsche, and then Audi, Oldsmobile involved. Buick was in, but was out of it by the time I got into it on a more regular basis. But it was a big deal and tons of history for the Trans Am series. So that was the goal.
And that weekend in '89, when you clinched the Players GM Championship and then as well got your first Trans Am win, people still tell me about that weekend, like whenever they meet me and figure out who I am. People who are there, they're like, oh yeah, that weekend in '89, blah, blah. So
yeah,
I know that was a big one.
Yeah, it was a roller coaster of a weekend. That's for darn sure. I ended up getting sponsorship from Mackenzie Financial with our Players GM team for Brother Rob and I, starting in '88, and I won the Montreal F1 support race and the Toronto Indy support race that year as a reward. Jim O'Donnell, who was the president of Mackenzie, he got me some sponsorship money to do a couple of Trans Am races in '88, which I did. So that was at I did 2 with Roush in '88. Road America. I think I forget where we finished. Had a problem, but qualified in the Fast Five. Got to meet Hans Struck. Got his autograph in the Fast Five presentation at Road America, and then the next weekend was at CTMP, and managed to get the pole and set a track record. And at the time, Jack Roush he wasn't that happy with that, because I think they were in a dispute with the SCCA over the what is now balance of performance, BOP, trying to figure out how to slow down the turbocharged cars. So it was, and his lobbying was not going very well when the unknown Canuck shows up and puts it on pole. But I remember driving that car. It was a Mercours, and this little 2-liter, maybe 2.5-liter, 4-cylinder engine, and it just, the thing was unbelievable how much power this thing had. And take the hood off, and there's an awful lot of space under the hood between the front wheels. There's literally this the little 4-cylinder. It looked like a sewing machine sitting in the middle between the front wheels, and yet this thing made 750, 850, 900 power. I'm sure they had 1,000 horsepower at one time when they had basically unlimited. There were fewer restrictions for the intercoolers, and but yeah, it was just super impressive. It had a 5-speed transmission, but every single time the 4-5 shift, it would spin the rear tires up the back straight. Yeah, just crazy. Incredible. But, so I remember that. To digress a little bit, we'd been top 5, 6, 7 with the car at CTMP back then, and I remember the last lap of practice, I caught up to one of my teammates who was actually in a Mustang. So it was Robert Lapalainen, who was a Finnish guy who was in a sponsored by JPS, and I actually caught him at 5B, and we went up the back straight, and he actually pulled me, and I thought, wow, that's impressive, that V8. So I remember coming into the pits and talking with the Ford Electronics guys about, wow, that V8, that's pretty impressive. And they're like, what do you mean? I said, well, he pulled me on the back straight. And they were like, that's impossible. So they've got they got laptops hooked up to the engine management system, which was unique back then. And
in '88 they had laptops.
They had an engine management system for that car back then. I think one of the first. It was developed by Ford. I think it was sort of universal. This EEC4, it was, as it was called, EEC4 system. Anyway, they plug in, and my the electronics for this thing had failed, and I've been running around in not limp mode, but in a reduced power mode. And so then they basically put a new computer in the thing for qualifying, but then you have to set the boost manually.
Yeah.
And they sort of took a guess at it. But I knew, just leaving the pits, it was like, oh boy.
Yeah.
Just when I, took off in first gear at the end of pit lane, going down into turn one, so, oh yeah, this has got some power now.
Yeah.
And anyway, they were able to, I got my qualifying run in, and then they were able to adjust the boost even further. But it was just a super impressive car to drive. It had no compression, and but it was,
and the turbo lag wasn't so bad.
No, it was, Lee White, who was a team manager then. He was the engine. The engine was his baby. That engine department was his, and he was just watch the boost gauge. If you can keep the boost up, you'll have plenty of power, plenty of torque, and it did. That was not that difficult to do, because it was not too dissimilar to what you did in karting when I was racing karts, where you brake with your left foot, but you're kind of kicking the throttle to keep the clutch engaged, so that to reduce the amount of slip. So I'm braking with my right foot, but as soon as I got back to the throttle, I'm kicking the throttle. And because the thing didn't have any compression, there wasn't it didn't unbalance the car by playing with the throttle. And then it was amazing. You could use, it was a difference of being able to stay in a taller gear, as long as you could keep the boost up. It's had great torque and unbelievable power.
Wow. So tell me then in 89 a little bit, and like we could go on forever, but I think let's wrap it up for now with the 89 race at
Sorry,
CTMP.
I got sidetracked.
Yeah,
right.
Come on. What are you doing?
Yes.
No, but there's so much more we could talk about. I mean, I want to talk about, the Chevy connection in Trans Am, and
sure,
racing the Ferrari in '97, and of course the Corvette team. But I think we'll save that for another day.
Okay.
And we'll hopefully, if we get Bernard on here, we'll do a deep dive into some of the Players GM and Rothman's Turbo Cup battles and some of those stories, and
yes,
hear his side of the story for it.
I hope so. Yeah.
But yeah, tell me about, because I've seen the video of that 89 Players finale, and that was a crazy race.
Yes. 50 50-mile race that would never end.
Yeah.
Yes.
So there was like 3 or 4 red flags.
I think 3. Yeah.
So they took out one of the starting. Yeah. Tell the story.
Yeah. Pit out was just beyond where is now the Michelin Bridge. That was where you merged onto the just on the downhill side going into turn 1, and there was guardrail, and so the starter stand was driver's left, but there was another smaller stand at pit out for essentially directing traffic, because they really needed an elevated stand for that particular marshal to see down the track in order to get you
Gotcha.
safely onto the track. And
Okay.
and it was past pit out and on driver's right, behind the guardrail. But so the lead up to that for me was, so I ran, in '88, ran on the Trans Am weekend, had a great outing, but finished second to, I'm sure it was Richard in the Players GM series. I was actually in a Firebird that year, Rob and I, and really wanted to win and it was our first year with Sunoco and McKenzie as well. And I really wanted to win the championship in '89. And coming into that race weekend, it was close between Richard and I. And, back then it was the getting speed out of those cars. It was lap one, engine cold, tires cold. Neither of them liked heat. So you needed to get everything you could out of lap one. And, the guys we had working on our team were really good about making sure that we were lined up. We got, our cars were prepared and ready to go, so that as soon as we were able to line the car up for in pre-grid, we were at the head of the line. So I got my brother behind me, and we roll out, and it was windy, overcast, threatening with rain, but the track was dry, and going for it off of turn 10. And as I come under the now is the Michelin Bridge, sail into and as I turn in and I'm looking down the hill, the track is wet, and literally corner workers are it rained right there from the time we left, and they either were just getting the slippery flag out or I didn't see it. All I saw was I'm sailing into turn one and it's wet. And back then they didn't have the runoff area. There was actually basically a 90 degree where there was a little bit of runoff area, but it came back, and then at the exit, basically where you're right, driver's left on the curb one, that you were right next to the guardrail, because they didn't have that was for the tunnel. Right. So they hadn't extended the tunnel at that point. But so I lost it, and I'm just sliding sideways, and I hit that 90 degree. It was protected by tires, but I hit it in the door, and it just threw the car up in the air and landed on its roof right in the middle of the track.
Yeah.
And it hurt.
Heard you say in an interview you bit your tongue.
Yeah, when I came down on the roof, I bit my tongue because my mouth was bleeding, and I bit my tongue. But
lucky you didn't concuss yourself.
Well, the scarier part was I'm upside down, and I'm looking up the track, and I'm thinking, and I can see cars are coming, and they're all out of control, and God. and I'm driver's side, upside down, facing the oncoming traffic. So it was like, anyway, we were able to. The car was junk, so we had to go to a backup car, which we had, and but it was looking like there was no chance to win the championship, because Richard ended up getting the pole, getting some qualifying points, and I think we were then. I might have had a 5-point lead, which was nothing, because it was 100 and something points for a win. Anyway, it was and I had to start at the back, and it was somewhere, there were close to 40 cars, even then. But the crazy part was, start number one was, it fortunately happened just behind me, but two cars got together. I went, back then it was when the green flag dropped, you could race. And I basically went straight up the middle. And so the wreck happened behind me. and two cars got together. One car went basically across at the pit exit, hit the guardrail there, which then rocked the flag stand for the grid mark or the corner worker there. Yeah. And it damaged the guardrail and unfortunately not the marshal. So there's a red flag.
Yeah.
So it's another restart, and they got fix the guardrail, and then the second restart, it was lap 2, and and even in those days there was a chase car as well as a pace car. They just followed the field for the first lap, and generally had somebody there was at least one qualified medical person. Anyway, I'm coming into turn 3 for lap 2 and moving my way up nicely. And there'd been as I'm coming around 3, there's this massive wreck at the exit of 3. And I guess after I'd gone by, there was there was somebody wrecked at the exit of 3, and so the chase car stopped. Well, then the leaders coming around in lap 2 got to duking it out and weren't paying attention, whatever. Anyway, Spinard and a bunch of the lead guys, they ended up piling into the chase car, and a couple of the cars were already there from the previous lap. So we got another red flag. But because the race had already started, Spinard couldn't get in his backup car.
Oh, so right.
We were able to, so just starting the race, managed to clinch the championship. So we were, and I was pretty sore. The impact, I went to hospital to check on my ribs. Everything was fine, just bruising. But it was really sore. And knowing the length of the Trans Am race, we put extra padding in. I actually had some to kind of make so I could roll into the padding for the right-hand corners. But I was pretty pumped up, having won the championship earlier in the day, and ended up winning the Trans Am race. And it was a fun race. It was 125 miles, so it required a stop for fuel. You didn't change tires, but it required a fuel stop, and I managed to.
What happened when you came out of that having won the championship in that Players GM race? You went straight to the.
Yeah, actually went straight to the Trans Am Series drivers meeting, and that was wearing my suit. I've seen some of the. I knew a few of the drivers, not well, but they had been watching.
Oh yeah.
They're like, "Were you just out in that?" It's like, those guys are crazy in those cars. Yes, they are. Anyway, it was.
Did you lead the race, the Trans Am race, from start to finish, or was?
No, I didn't because I was pretty sore. I missed practice on Saturday, so I got in for qualifying only, and I'm somewhere in the top 10, 7th, 8th. But I knew we had a good car, and then just kind of carved my way to the front. I recall a number of the passes were outside turn 8. Of course, naturally going up the back straight, and they're trying to block the inside, and no problem, I'll go this way.
Wow.
But yeah, it was exciting, and Jim O'Donnell from McKenzie Financial was a big part of helping for that. Sunoco helped out, Jim was there, Jack Roush was there, and I was still I was pretty worn out by the time the race was over, really quite sore. And I remember Jack Roush in victory lane, and he leans in the passenger side window and, "Hey, Ron, you play pretty good, Hurt." Hey, thanks, Jack. But it was, that sort of led to, not a full-time season, but I think I got 10 races, 9 or 10 races in a 13, 14 race season in 1990 with Roush, and ended up it became the full-time gig and getting paid, which was nice.
Crazy story, especially how the opportunities seem to like that story of Gordy and the Buick, that team. I mean, that's kind of like you said, is like a bit of a springboard for the stuff that happened after, and of course, getting an opportunity to become a full time with GM, and that's something you've been with since 94 or whatever. So,
and in Roush's Trans Am team, the full-time guy was or their designated driver to win the championship in '89 was Dorsey Schrader, and that was the ride I was hoping to get, and they picked Dorsey, and in hindsight, Dorsey had quite a bit more experience than I did, and that was for Roush and for Ford, that was probably the right call, based on what they knew. But it didn't. There was no shortage of fuel for motivation in that race in '89 to try to win it. So.
Well, we'll have to. I mean, we could go on for another like 2 hours, but we'll have to do it again. You leave that as an episode later on.
Maybe okay. We'll see if we can't get Richard Spinard.
Well, yeah. I mean, that would just be because I've seen. I've gone back and watched a lot of those old races, and you guys had some spectacular battles. So.
Yeah, there was a lot. There was lots of them. It was a stout field. Robin Bach, Peter Lockhart, Scott Maxwell. Dr. Mark Dankos. He was a factor. It was Kenny, and then Kenny Wilden started to come on. Obviously, my brother Rob. It was. Great days.
Yeah. And then that era too, and that era of Trans Am really almost like a second. I know they talk about, the late 60s as being kind of like the golden era of Trans Am, but really, like I feel like the early 90s was kind of like a second golden era for Trans Am. It was just like a really competitive time, and and Tommy Kendall and Dorsey and Scott Pruitt, Scott Sharp, and
Jack Baldwin.
The Archers.
The Archers, So and it was that was the in the sort of early to mid '90s when
Willie T. Ribbs.
Willie.
Willie
T. went. He was when I was in Trans Am. He was in IMSA. I think I only raced against him a couple of times.
Yeah, that's true.
But he was a cool guy. What a character. There were a field full of great characters. Jack Baldwin was one. Scott Sharp was the preppy little kid from Connecticut. And Darren Brassfield from California. Chris Neifel, obviously Kendall. Dorsey, Les Lindley, this silver bearded guy, Jim Dorhog, the perennial privateer. But you had Chevy.
Paul Gentilozzi.
Yeah, Paul Gentilozzi. Yeah, certainly. Paul was a big factor with his Oldsmobiles at one point. So there's Irv Hare was another one, ran a family team. But you had at one point you had Oldsmobile spending money there, Ford, Chevy, Dodge. It was in those years in the 90s. It was pretty spectacular. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Audi was there just a couple of years, and then they moved to IMSA.
Yeah.
So
cool. Well,
man.
Cool.
Thanks, Sammy.
Yeah, thank you. And like I said, we could go on forever, but we'll call it here for now. And
good luck with the editing.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Thanks to Dallas, the Family Lab, for some of the
interruptions.
For the appearances today. So
and voice only.
Yeah. All right, man.
Cool, man.
You take care, and I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Sammy.
Okay. Bye, everybody.